this is Ilina and welcome to another LDRS Creative card video. Today I'm giving you a little sneak peek of the May release. I'll be using a stamp set that's called Tulips, along with the Everyday Sayings stamp set and die set. So I've already, from previous projects, I have already stamped and embossed. I'll be using You Are Amazing. So before we go on to the sentiment, let's do our main image. I'll be using the Karin markers, and I will show you a technique where you're stamping with the markers in order to color your image. So I have a panel of watercolor paper, and what I'm doing is I position the stamps I'm using my stamp positioning tool. So I have the stamps on the door of it, and I'm adding color using the markers. You can use any water-soluble markers that you have handy, but I like using the Karin markers because their pigmentation is high and you get a very nice and saturated impression. So I'm just coloring the stamp. Okay, next what we'll do, we'll spritz the watercolor paper with some water. I'm holding the pad there so that the water doesn't go onto the stamp. I'm just spreading that water with my finger. Then I'm closing the door and holding that for a few seconds. That allows the color to bleed and move around. So you can see here, because the tulips are a little larger image and there are less lines, it looks more like line image compared to the butterfly and the leaves. So I'm adding more color. And what I'm doing here, I'm just spraying directly onto the stamp this time and repeating the process, closing the door of my stamp positioning tool and adding color. So now since my paper is still wet, I'm using the marker. To add more pink, I'm using pale pink and spreading that with a paintbrush. You can leave it as is, but I just wanted my tulips to be a little bit more pink. I'm just scribbling onto my glass mat and picking up with my brush and adding some color. Okay, so this looks very messy for me. I'm a little bit, I like clean lines, so I will stamp on top of it. Before we stamped, I'm trying to dry my image. I want to be completely dry, my panel. So I'm using my heat tool at the low setting that's not for embossing. Okay, to make sure that this is nice and dry and to flatten it a little bit, I decided to use my foiling machine and run that through it. So this will make sure that it's nice, that it flattens out, it's nice and dry. Because we're gonna stamp in black and emboss using clear embossing powder. So you don't want any of the embossing powder sticking to areas that are still wet. Okay, I think that looks good. I'm putting it back into my stamp positioning tool. Since I did not remove the stamps, they'll be at the same place. So I'm using the Raven ink pad. I will stamp a few times to make sure that that ink is nice and wet when I add the clear embossing powder. So stamp a couple times. And I have here my container with the clear embossing powder. Apply the clear embossing powder, shake off the excess, and now I'm melting that embossing powder. Okay, so we have that done. So now I decided to add little golden splatters for a little bit more interest. Since it's kind of a little bit, for me, it looks very messy. But because I like nice and clean lines, so this is a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I really like the effect that I was able to achieve. And stamping with black ink on top, it kind of makes those lines look very nice. Okay, so you can either set your panel aside to dry, or do the same method as I do with the heat tool at low setting to dry that gold paint. Next, since I've already stamped and embossed the sentiment, I'm just die cutting it. It says "You're amazing." Also, I die cut 3 additional panels and the black shadow, and I'll stack those up. You can also use 1 layer of each and just use foam tape. I feel that with stacking those, it gives more sturdiness, and it helps when the card goes through the mail. Okay, now my panel was 5.5 by 4.25, so I'm trimming it down to 4 by 5.25. I will add 3 panels on the back. I have cut down a little bit smaller, so it's like 3 and 7/8 by 5 and 1/8, and I have 3 pieces of this is heavyweight cardstock. It's an expensive heavyweight cardstock. Again, you can use foam tape or craft foam for this. Added my platform from my embossing machine. You can add anything heavy on top to make sure that dries nice and flat, especially because we're using watercolor paper that was already saturated with water and kind of warped a little bit. So to finish off the card, I'm adhering to a top folding black note card that I made using 4.25 by 11 inches piece of cardstock, and I scored at 5.5. So next we'll add the sentiment, and we'll add some black halfback pearls for a little bit more interest. So at first I was going to add 5, and then I decided to add a couple more on the top left corner. So you can see this go in one diagonal from the top left to the bottom right, where the flower and the butterfly go from the bottom right to the top left. So the card is balanced. Okay, here's a closer look for the card. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also click the bell button so you're notified when we have new videos. Also visit our blog for more ideas and more inspiration. Bye!